Hey, you got a second? Can I see your documents?
Yeah, what's this about?
We got a call you've been suspiciously hanging around.
Okay, what is suspicious about just standing near a hotel?
What are you writing down?
I'm federal, on duty. If you need to confirm that, call your supervisor or have dispatch verify.
Don't give me federal. Ask
Picture this. A Secret Service agent on official duty ended up sitting in the back of a local police cruiser. Not for a ride-along. Not for a courtesy move. For a suspicious person call that turned into a power test in public. Drop in the comments where you're watching from, state or country. And if you're into stories where body cams and paperwork do what arguments can't, hit like and subscribe, because this one is all about how accountability actually happens. Now, rewind. The agent's name was Dorian Reed. Plainclothes, advance work. The kind of job where you blend in on purpose because you're not there to be seen. He was working the perimeter of a downtown hotel that was hosting a high-profile appearance the next day. His assignment wasn't glamorous. It was entrances, exits, lines of sight, choke points, and the boring details that stop bad days from happening. He carried a small notepad because phones draw attention and screenshots get misread. He paced. He paused. He watched doors. He checked angles from the sidewalk to the lobby. Normal advance work. Hotel staff didn't see advance work. They saw man taking notes. One staff member, front desk and security overlap, the kind of employee who's told to report anything odd, called local police. They didn't say Secret Service. They said suspicious man. They mentioned the note-taking. They mentioned he'd been walking around the same entrances more than once. That's all it took. Officer Evan Klein rolled up like it was a routine stop. Patrol mindset. Clear the call fast. Figure out if it's nothing or something. He approached Reed near a side entrance that fed into a service corridor. Not a dramatic spot, just public enough to make it messy. People walking by, cameras on the building, a couple smokers near the wall, a rideshare pulling up every 30 seconds. Reed didn't run, didn't argue, didn't posture. He did the professional thing. Hands visible, calm stance, controlled voice. He identified himself as federal law enforcement and said he was on duty. Klein didn't like that answer. Not because it was unbelievable, because it didn't come with details. Reed wouldn't say who was coming, when, or what exactly he was checking. Not out loud, not on a sidewalk, not with random civilians 10 feet away. Reed offered the clean solution. Verification. He said Klein could confirm his credentials through dispatch, or call a supervisor, or request a federal contact number. Anything that didn't involve him explaining a protective mission in public. Klein pushed anyway. He wanted Reed to answer questions right there. He wanted Reed to hand over everything, ID, notes, phone, like this was a normal stop where the officer runs the whole show. Reed stayed polite and firm. He kept repeating the same point. He'd verify identity through proper channels, but he wasn't going to brief a local officer on an active protective detail in the open. That's when Klein started changing the framing. The contact stopped being a quick check. Klein treated it like Reed was being difficult, like refusing to explain meant refusing to cooperate. The tone tightened. Klein's questions turned into commands. The body cam caught it all, including the moment Reed offered verification again. Klein went to officer safety. That phrase that can mean anything if someone lets it. He told Reed he was going to detain him until he figured out who he really was. He pushed for handcuffs. Reed didn't fight. He didn't threaten. He didn't reach. He didn't do anything that made cuffs necessary. He just didn't give the public explanation Klein wanted. And Klein took that personally. He stalled the obvious fix, confirming credentials, and leaned into control instead. He called for backup. He positioned Reed where he could keep him pinned to the interaction. He talked like the cuffs were inevitable, like this was just procedure. Reed kept his composure, still offered the same options. Dispatch verification, supervisor, credential check, fast, quiet, clean. Klein kept pushing for the shortcut. Physical control first, verification later. That right there was the pivot. the mistake forming in real time. Because once you've got a clear path to confirm identity and you ignore it, you're not solving a safety problem anymore. You're creating a legal one. And the camera kept rolling. Klein kept circling the same pressure point. He wanted Reed to explain himself out loud. Reed wouldn't. Not on a sidewalk. Not next to a hotel entrance. Not with civilians within earshot. Klein moved closer. He told Reed he was being detained. He said it like it was already decided. Then he pushed the handcuffs again, framing it as temporary and for safety. Reed didn't give him a reaction to feed off. He stayed steady. He repeated that he'd verified credentials through dispatch or a supervisor. He even offered to stand still, keep his hands visible, and wait while the officer confirmed it. Simple. Safe. No drama. Klein didn't take the off-ramp. He treated Reed's refusal to discuss the mission as refusal to cooperate. That's where officers get themselves into trouble. You can't punish someone for not giving you information they don't legally have to give, especially when they're offering a direct way to confirm identity. Klein called for backup like he was dealing with a threat. On Bodycam, it read like escalation without cause. Reed wasn't aggressive. He wasn't evasive. He wasn't trying to leave. He was literally offering verification. Klein then did the thing that always looks bad later. He delayed the verification process while pushing restraints. He could have keyed dispatch immediately and requested a credential check. He could have asked for a sergeant right away. He didn't. Instead, he kept talking, kept asserting control, kept trying to win the interaction on the sidewalk. Reed stayed careful. He didn't reach for his credentials in a fast way. He didn't make sudden movements. He kept telling Klein he had federal credentials on him, and that he'd present them the right way with the right process, so nobody could claim he made a threatening move. Reed knew the game. He'd seen enough videos. A couple people slowed down to watch. Nothing huge, but enough to make it worse. Once a scene forms, officers get stubborn. They don't want to look like they lost. That's the ego trap. Klein fell right into it. Backup arrived first. Another local officer, same posture, same assumptions. Klein gave a quick summary that framed Reed as suspicious and uncooperative. Not violent, not dangerous. Just won't answer and won't explain why he's here. Reed again identified as federal law enforcement and again offered verification. He didn't change his tone. He didn't raise his voice. He kept it professional. That's what made the next part so ugly. Klein committed to the detention. He moved Reed toward the cruiser and treated the cuffs like the default. Reed didn't resist physically. He made it clear he didn't consent to being detained without verification. He said verification was available right now. Klein ignored it. From the outside, it looked like a local officer cuffing a calm man who claimed to be federal, while refusing to take the obvious steps to confirm it, because that's what it was. Then Sergeant Dana Morales showed up. Different energy. No theatrics. She asked for the basics, fast. Who called? What was actually observed? What Reed had actually done? Then she focused on the only thing that mattered: identity verification. Morales didn't demand Reed explain the mission. She understood that federal protective work isn't a street briefing. She pushed Klein toward dispatch confirmation immediately. She asked for credentials to be shown in a controlled way. She asked dispatch to run the federal verification line. Dispatch came back quick once someone actually asked the right questions. Reed checked out real name, real agency, on-duty status confirmed through the proper channels. And right after that confirmation, the whole posture shifted like a switch got flipped. The detention ended fast, too fast. Klein uncuffed him. The backup officer suddenly got quiet. Morales kept it controlled, but you could tell she was already thinking about paperwork and exposure. Reed didn't celebrate. He didn't taunt. He didn't threaten. He just delivered the line that stuck because it was true. He said the problem was never verification. The problem was the delay. He walked back toward the hotel perimeter like he still had a job to finish. Because he did. And behind him, the local officers stood there with a body cam file that didn't match the story they wanted to tell. Because the timeline was locked in. The call ended on the sidewalk, but the real fight started in the next hour. Quiet rooms, quiet screens, people replaying the same clip and realizing it didn't look like good instincts. It looked like an unnecessary detention with a clear alternative sitting right there. Reed didn't make a scene. He didn't have to. He did what federal agencies do when a local stop disrupts a protective mission. He documented the contact while it was still fresh. Time, location, names, unit numbers, what was said, and what was offered, what was refused. He flagged the body cam because he knew the body cam told the story cleaner than any email ever would. By the next morning, the complaint didn't land as a rant. It landed as a package. A formal interagency notification hit the department. Not a public blast, not a social media war. A professional, controlled message that basically said, your officer detained an on-duty federal agent, delayed verification, and created operational risk near a protected venue. Provide the footage. Provide the CAD log. Provide the radio traffic. Identify who approved what. That's when the local department's mood changed. Because now it wasn't just a weird stop. Now it was a federal agency asking for records tied to a high-profile event. Command staff hates that kind of attention. Not because they're guilty, because it forces them to be precise. And precision exposes sloppiness. Here's what the department had in front of them. The initial 911 or non-emergency call from hotel staff. Vague. Suspicious man. Taking notes. No threats, no weapons, no trespass. The CAD entry and dispatch notes. What officers were told, what they acknowledged. The body cam timeline. Clear, unedited, with Reed offering a path to verification multiple times. The delay. Minutes that weren't filled with checking. They were filled with control talk and cuff pressure. The moment the sergeant arrived and fixed it in one move by doing what should have happened first. Internal Affairs opened a review. Not because Reed wanted revenge, because the footage forced the issue. Once there's a recorded detention that looks unjustified, supervisors have to decide, defend it or correct it. Klein wrote his report the way officers usually do when they sense heat. He framed Reed as uncooperative. He emphasized unknown subject, refused to explain, officer safety, high-risk area, suspicious behavior near venue. The problem was simple. The camera didn't match the tone of the report. Reed stayed calm. Reed offered verification. Reed didn't threaten anyone. Reed didn't try to flee. Reed didn't reach. Reed didn't act like a danger. The body cam showed a man trying to resolve it the right way, while Klein kept trying to win the moment. Then Morales wrote her report. Short, factual, focused on sequence. She documented that once she took over and initiated proper credential verification, dispatch confirmed Reed quickly, and the detention ended immediately. That report mattered because it built a clean contrast. Before supervisor, escalating. After supervisor, resolved. Now the department had a choice, and the choice was ugly either way. If command backed Klein hard, they'd be on the hook for defending a detention that looked unnecessary on video. That's how lawsuits happen. That's how policy failures become training bullet points in somebody else's class. If command held Klein accountable, they'd have to admit the real issue. Their officers didn't have a solid procedure for verifying federal credentials under pressure, or they had one, and Klein ignored it. Either way, it's a department problem, and it got more complicated. Because the hotel had cameras too, exterior angles, timestamps, footage showing Reed wasn't sneaking. He was walking in open view. Footage showing Klein keeping Reed there instead of confirming and moving on. The event still happened, but the protective detail got disrupted. That fact alone raised the stakes. When you interfere with a security operation near a venue, every mistake gets a bigger spotlight. Behind closed doors, there were meetings. Training staff pulled policies. Legal counsel reviewed state detention standards and how officer safety gets interpreted. Command staff asked the uncomfortable question, Why didn't he just verify it when the guy offered verification? That question kept coming back because it was the whole case. Verification existed. The path was offered. Klein delayed it while escalating the restraint level. The timeline made that undeniable. And once the timeline is undeniable, the story stops being emotional. It turns mechanical. Minutes, decisions, documentation, liability. By the time Internal Affairs finished the first pass, nobody was debating what happened. They were debating what to call it, because the footage didn't show a dangerous suspect. It showed a calm federal agent offering multiple clean verification options, while a local officer kept trying to force the interaction into a detention. The longer Klein delayed verification, the worse it looked, not just legally. Professionally, command staff pulled everything into one timeline: dispatch log, CAD notes, radio traffic, Bodycam timestamps, supervisor arrival, credential confirmation, release, and that timeline created the department's fork in the road. Option 1, defend the ego. That meant arguing that Klein had reasonable suspicion to stop Reed, and that restraints were justified under officer safety. The problem? Klein didn't just stop him. He prolonged it after Reed offered verification. He tried to make cuffs the solution instead of confirmation. That's what turns a stop into a detention problem. Courts and lawyers don't care how offended an officer felt. They care why the person was held, and whether the police used the least intrusive path once identity was clearly confirmable. Option 2, fix the procedure. That meant acknowledging what Morales already proved on video. Verification solved it in minutes. So the real failure wasn't a suspicious man. It was the decision to stall verification while escalating. The department picked option 2, not out of kindness, out of self-preservation. Klein got pulled off street duty during the review. Then came the corrective actions. Depending on how the legal unit read the detention length and the restraint attempt, it went one of 2 ways. Discipline plus retraining if command concluded the stop skirted the line, but didn't fully cross it. Written reprimand, documented counseling, mandatory training on detentions, credential verification, and interagency contacts. Morales didn't get praised publicly, but internally, she became the example of how to handle it. Confirm first, don't posture. Civil claim, settlement exposure, if counsel believed the detention crossed the line into an unlawful hold, especially with the clear verification path offered and ignored. That's where things get quiet. No big announcement. Just a claim number, closed-door meetings, and the department cutting a check to make the risk go away. Either way, the interagency complaint didn't get brushed aside. Federal partners don't forget this stuff, and local agencies know it. Relationships matter. Mutual aid matters. Future security events depend on trust. So policy changed. Fast. The department issued an updated procedure for contacts involving claimed federal credentials. Immediate supervisor notification when someone claims federal law enforcement status during a suspicious person call near a sensitive venue. Dispatch verification as the first step, not the last resort. No escalation to restraints without articulable facts beyond, he won't explain his job in public. Clear documentation requirements. Timestamps for when verification was requested, when it was attempted, and when it was confirmed. They also looped the hotel into a better reporting path. If staff saw advance work again, they were told to contact venue security or the event liaison first, and to provide behavior details, not vibes. Note-taking alone wasn't a threat. Walking a perimeter wasn't a crime. Reed kept working. That's the part people miss. He didn't win with a speech. He didn't stand there and lecture anyone. He let the system do what it's supposed to do when there's proof. Recording, timeline, oversight. Klein's mistake wasn't talking to him. It wasn't checking him. It was ignoring the clean verification route and trying to force compliance through control. That's how routine calls turn into civil liability. That's how departments end up rewriting policy after the fact. And the real ending beat wasn't dramatic. It was administrative. That's what accountability looks like in real life. A clip gets reviewed, a timeline gets built. A department chooses whether it wants to defend ego or fix procedure. So let me ask you, if you were Reed, would you have accepted cuffs to keep it calm? Or would you have held the boundary and forced verification the right way? Drop your take in the comments, share this with someone who thinks body cams don't matter, and subscribe for more real-world stories where the truth is in the footage.
Sir, I need to check your documents.
What's the reason for the stop?
Your equipment, your tag light back there. It's a traffic thing.
Okay. Am I getting a ticket or a warning?
You got anything in the car I need to know about?
No, and I don't consent to any search.
Why not? If there's nothing in there, it's not a big
This
deal.
is my right.
You're done with the traffic stop?
A patrol officer had Jamal Carter standing on the shoulder with his hands visible, spotlight pinned to his face, while the officer talked fast and kept changing the rules. First, it was a routine stop. Then it was questions that had nothing to do with driving. Then it was threats about pulling him out, searching his car, and detaining him for another safety. So here's the question. What happens when an officer tries a driving while a black stop on someone who doesn't panic, doesn't argue, and doesn't give up a single right just to make the moment end? Because this time, the target wasn't just any driver. And the camera didn't just capture a bad stop. It captured the start of an accountability chain the officer couldn't outrun. Quick pause. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or state in the comments. And if you watch stories where people stay calm and still hold authority accountable, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this one. Now, rewind. Jamal Carter left the federal courthouse later than he wanted. He was mid-30s, black, and precise in the way people get when their job punishes sloppy details. He prosecuted cases for a living, not traffic tickets, federal cases. He also knew how quickly routine could turn into dangerous the second a cop decided you looked like a problem. He drove a newer sedan. No mods, no tint, no loud anything. He took the same route home because it was well lit and predictable. He didn't speed, he didn't drift. He didn't do the usual mistakes that give an officer a clean reason. A patrol car slid in behind him anyway. At first it stayed back. Then it crept closer. Then it rode his bumper long enough that Jamal could feel the pressure without seeing the driver's face. He checked his speed, checked his mirrors, stayed steady. The lights came on. Jamal didn't slam the brakes. He signaled. He pulled over smoothly and stopped on a wide shoulder with space from traffic. He put the car in park, turned on the cabin light. Rolled the window down halfway, both hands on the wheel. The officer walked up fast, flashlight sweeping the cabin like he expected to find a reason. He asked for license and registration. Jamal moved slowly, narrated what he was doing, and handed them over. No attitude, no lecture, just compliance with the basics. Then the officer shifted. He started asking where Jamal was coming from, where he was going, why he was over here, who the car belonged to, and whether there was anything he should know about inside the vehicle. That last one wasn't small talk. It was a setup for consent. Jamal kept it tight. He gave only what he had to. He didn't volunteer a story. He didn't joke. He didn't try to prove he belonged on that road. The officer claimed a minor equipment issue as the reason for the stop. Jamal didn't debate it. He just clocked it, because the officer's tone didn't match the excuse. The tone said the stop was about him, not the car. The officer leaned in again, peering into the back seat, scanning the floorboard, lingering with the flashlight. He wasn't checking for safety hazards. He was hunting for a reason to escalate. Then came the first push. The officer told Jamal to step out of the vehicle. Jamal complied. Slow, hands visible. He stood where he was directed. He didn't make sudden moves. He didn't challenge the order. He understood the street version of the rules. You can be right and still end up in cuffs if you give them a moment to claim you were non-compliant. The officer immediately went for the real goal. He asked to search the car. Jamal refused consent. Calm voice, no sarcasm, no speech, just a clear boundary. That single refusal changed the entire interaction. The officer's posture tightened. His voice sharpened. He started talking like Jamal had done something wrong by not giving permission. He implied that refusing made him suspicious. He suggested things would go easier if Jamal stopped making it difficult. Jamal didn't match the energy. He didn't argue about the Constitution on the roadside. He used short, clean questions that forced the officer to either justify the stop or admit he was fishing. He asked what the specific violation was. He asked whether he was being detained or free to leave. The officer didn't answer directly. He started issuing commands instead. Stand here, face away, keep your hands visible, then slid right back into another request to search. Jamal refused again and asked for a supervisor. That request landed differently, because people who know nothing ask for a supervisor like it's a threat. Jamal asked like it was a procedure, like he understood how records get reviewed and how timelines get checked. The officer glanced down toward his chest, toward the body camera, then looked back at Jamal. He didn't like the direction this was going. He tried to regain control with a threat. Handcuffs for safety. Jamal didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't step back. He just asked what crime he was suspected of committing and repeated the question that matters most in moments like this. Detained or free to go. 2 patrol cars were on the shoulder now, one behind the other. Backup had arrived quietly and stayed out of it, letting the first officer run the stop. And that's the key detail. This wasn't a quick ticket. This was a pressure stop. A pretext, a test to see if Jamal would fold and consent. Jamal didn't fold. Officer Harlan heard, "I don't consent," and took it like a personal challenge. He stepped closer, angled his body to block Jamal's view of the car, and started talking faster, like speed could replace legal grounds. He repeated the same theme in different words. Refusal meant suspicion, and suspicion meant the officer could do whatever he wanted next. Jamal didn't debate him. He didn't insult him. He didn't plead. He asked for the legal basis to extend the stop beyond the claimed equipment issue. Harlan didn't answer that cleanly. He pivoted to control. He ordered Jamal to move to the curb, then to turn around, then to keep his hands up, then to hand over his phone, then not to reach for anything. Contradictions on purpose. Confusion makes people slip. A slip turns into non-compliance. Non-compliance becomes justification. Jamal didn't slip. He kept his hands visible and said he would comply once the instructions were clear and safe. He asked again whether he was being detained or free to leave. Harlan snapped back that Jamal was being detained for officer safety. That phrase showed up a lot when officers wanted control without explaining why. Then Harlan switched to the next pressure tactic: consequences. He implied the car could be towed. He implied it could be held. He implied an inventory search would happen anyway, so Jamal might as well make it easy. Jamal didn't bargain. He asked if the vehicle was being impounded right now, yes or no. And if yes, what policy or statute allowed towing a drivable car over a minor equipment claim? Harlan dodged again. He said procedure. He said discretion. He said, "You're making it worse." Jamal kept his voice level and repeated the boundary. No consent to search, and he wanted a supervisor. Harlan's backup unit sat back and watched. No interruption. No course correction. That mattered. It told Jamal the department's culture didn't discourage this style of stop. They let it play out. Harlan took a step toward the car, shined his light through the window, and looked for something, anything, that could be turned into probable cause. When he didn't find it, he reached for the magic sentence that officers know can open doors. He claimed he smelled an odor coming from inside the vehicle. He said it like it ended the conversation. Jamal didn't laugh. He didn't accuse him of lying. He didn't say anything that could trigger a combative note in a report. He treated it like a statement that had to be locked into the timeline. He asked the officer to clarify what odor, where it was coming from, and when exactly he first noticed it. Not as a debate, as documentation. That's when Harlan's face tightened, because now he had a problem. The camera was running, the stated reason for the stop had already been given, and the odor appeared only after consent was refused. Anyone reviewing the footage would see the order of events. Harlan tried to regain the upper hand with the next escalation: cuffs. He told Jamal to put his hands behind his back temporarily. Not an arrest, he implied, just a step, just safety. Jamal didn't offer his wrists. He didn't pull away either. He stood still and asked what crime he was suspected of committing and whether he was being placed in handcuffs. Harlan answered with that same empty shield: officer safety. Then Jamal made his own move. He asked for Officer Harlan's badge number and name. Harlan gave it, clipped and irritated. Jamal repeated it back out loud, slow enough for audio to catch it clearly. That's the moment the stop stopped being private. A couple cars had slowed as they passed. One driver, Maya Ellis, still in scrubs from a hospital shift, didn't just glance and keep going. She parked a short distance away and started recording on her phone from inside her vehicle. Her video caught what bodycams sometimes blur: the spacing, the posture, the way Harlan kept crowding Jamal, the way the backup officer stood off like a spectator. Harlan didn't notice Maya at first. He was focused on Jamal's refusal to play scared. He tried one more angle. He suggested Jamal didn't belong in that neighborhood. He framed it like concern, but it landed like a gate, like a warning, like a statement about race without saying the word. That was the mask slipping. Jamal let a beat pass, not drama, control. He wanted the words to sit on the record. Then, calmly, he requested a supervisor again. Harlan hesitated. A half second. Long enough. Jamal didn't announce his job yet. He didn't threaten anyone with who he was. He stayed locked on the process. The basis, the detention status, the supervisor. Harlan stepped away and radioed for one, voice suddenly more careful than it had been. Because now the officer knew something else, too. This wasn't just a driver with a complaint. This was a driver building a clean record in real time, with a witness recording from the side. Sergeant Nguyen arrived in under 10 minutes, which told you the department knew exactly what kind of stop this was turning into. She pulled in behind the second unit, stepped out slow, and took one look at the spacing. Jamal standing exposed on the shoulder. Officer Harlan too close, backup hanging back, everyone letting Harlan drive the situation. Nguyen didn't start with bravado. She started with information. She asked Harlan, in that calm supervisor tone, what the stop was for and what the current status was. Ticket, warning, detention, arrest. She needed a category. Harlan gave her a messy answer. He tried to stitch together the equipment claim, then the vague suspicion, then the odor line he'd added later. He talked like he was building a case while he spoke. Nguyen didn't argue with him on the roadside. She didn't need to. She was watching the body cam. She was watching the driver. She was watching the timeline. Then she turned to Jamal and asked his side. Jamal didn't give a speech. He gave a clean sequence. Stop reasons stated by Harlan. Request for consent. Refusal. Escalation. Threats. New reasons appearing after refusal. Request for supervisor. He kept his tone flat and his hands visible the whole time. Nguyen asked for ID. Jamal told her where it was, moved slowly, and handed it over. Along with his license, he produced a credential wallet. Not flashy, official. The kind of thing people don't carry unless they have a reason. Nguyen looked at it once and her face changed. Not panic, not fear, recognition. She asked one follow-up question that mattered. what Jamal did for the federal government. Jamal answered with the title and office: Federal Prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney. He didn't say it like a threat. He said it like it was relevant to how the stop should proceed, because it was. Officer Harlan heard it and went rigid. This was the exact moment the power dynamic snapped. A second earlier, Harlan was trying to control the pace by tossing commands and half-reasons. Now he was doing quick mental math. Bodycam audio, supervisor present, a credential in the sergeant's hand, and a driver who clearly knew the rules. Harlan tried to recover by turning polite. He suddenly sounded professional. He tried to reframe the stop as proactive policing. He implied he was just doing his job. He hinted that Jamal was misunderstanding. Nguyen didn't buy the rewrite. She didn't call him a liar either. She just asked whether Harlan had written a citation yet, and whether he had any articulable facts on record that justified a search without consent. Harlan stalled. He talked about training. He talked about indicators. He said the driver seemed evasive, even though Jamal had stood still and answered minimally. He leaned hard on vibes. Nguyen's patience thinned. You could see it in the way she tightened her focus and shortened her questions. She asked one more time for the clear reason for the stop. Then she asked whether Harlan had run the plate and confirmed the vehicle status. Then she asked whether the alleged equipment issue was observable and documented. Harlan couldn't keep the story straight. The stop had too many layers added in the wrong order. Meanwhile, Maya in the parked car kept recording. Her phone captured the part that always matters later: the officer's tone shift after the credential appeared, the way his body language shrank, the way he stopped crowding Jamal once a supervisor and a federal title entered the scene. Nguyen made a decision. She told Harlan to step back to his cruiser, not a suggestion, a directive. She took control of the scene. Then she turned to Jamal and told him clearly whether he was being detained. She told him the stop was ending. She told him he was free to go. Jamal didn't move fast. He didn't celebrate. He didn't clap back. He did the smart thing. He asked for the incident number, asked for Nguyen's name, and asked how he could obtain the body cam footage through the proper process. Nguyen gave him the information. She didn't love the situation, but she understood the stakes. A clean, calm driver requesting documentation is the kind of request that becomes an exhibit later. Harlan stood near his cruiser, quiet now, watching his stop collapse. Jamal got back into his car the same way he got out. Slow, visible hands, no sudden movements. He started the engine. He merged back into traffic like nothing happened. But it wasn't nothing, because Jamal wasn't going home to cool off. He was going home to make calls. Jamal didn't post about it. He didn't do a victory lap. He did what people in his job do when something looks dirty and the record is already rolling. He documented it. That night, he wrote down the sequence while it was fresh. Times, locations, unit numbers. The exact claims Officer Harlan used, in the order he used them. He included the supervisor's arrival time. He noted the backup unit's role, standing there, letting it happen. Then he made 2 calls. First call went to a colleague he trusted inside the U.S. Attorney's office. Not to get revenge, to create a clean internal record that the office had a potential civil rights issue involving a local department. Second call went to the department's professional standards line. He filed a formal complaint, not a rant. He requested preservation of all body-worn camera footage, dash camera footage, radio traffic, CAD logs, and any automatic plate reader hits in the area. Preservation matters. Without it, footage disappears. Policies get stretched. Timelines get fuzzy. Jamal didn't give them that space. And then the third thing happened. The piece most people don't get. Maya Ellis reached out. She wasn't looking for attention. She'd recorded because she'd seen the way the stop was going. The next morning, she sent a message to the department's public email with her video attached and a simple note saying she was willing to provide it to investigators. That forced the department's hand, because now it wasn't just their footage. It was an outside angle that showed posture, distance, tone shifts, and how the officer's entire demeanor changed the moment authority showed up in the form he respected. Within a week, the department contacted Jamal to acknowledge the complaint and schedule an interview. Professional tone, careful wording, no admissions, just process. Internal Affairs pulled the footage, and this is where Officer Harlan's problem became obvious. The timeline didn't support him. The body cam showed the stop reason stated early, the consent request, the refusal, then the escalation, then the new justifications appearing after the refusal, then the threat of cuffs, then the odor claim arriving late. It looked like a stop searching for a reason, not a reason leading to a stop. Maya's video didn't replace the body cam. It boxed it in. It confirmed tone and spacing. It showed how Harlan's aggression wasn't mutual. It wasn't two people arguing. It was one officer trying to dominate a calm driver. The department placed Harlan on administrative leave while they reviewed. Standard move. But the quiet part was this. They couldn't risk him doing another stop like that, while this one was under a microscope. The chief's office got briefed. City legal got briefed. Risk management got briefed. Because even if the department wanted to downplay it, the city understood the exposure, biased policing allegation, unlawful detention issues, potential false statements, policy violations, and a witness video that would look terrible in any public setting. And then the accountability part hit him where it always hits. Paperwork. Harlan had written a report. He had to. That's how departments justify what happened. His report tried to clean the stop up. It used vague terms. It leaned on training and experience. It framed Jamal as evasive. It pushed the odor claim like it had been present from the start. But video doesn't care about narrative. Investigators compared his report to the footage. They compared his radio calls. They compared the exact moment the odor appeared. They compared the wording he used with other stops he'd done. Pattern matters. Then they pulled his traffic stop history. Pretext stops in the same quarter. Similar vague reasons. Disproportionate stops on black drivers. Frequent consent searches. A few complaints that never went anywhere because the drivers didn't have video, didn't have names, didn't know the process. This time, the process found him. Short-term consequences came fast. Harlan lost patrol duties while the investigation continued. His supervisors restricted discretionary stops. The department issued an internal memo reminding officers that refusal to consent doesn't create probable cause and doesn't justify escalation by itself. Sergeant Nguyen's body cam and actions got reviewed too, not because she did wrong, but because command staff needed to show they took the whole event seriously. Jamal didn't just want discipline, he wanted clarity. So he requested the footage through the public records process where applicable, and through formal channels where it wasn't. He also met with a civil rights attorney. Not to cash out, to evaluate whether the stop crossed legal lines that needed more than an internal slap on the wrist. The city moved the way cities move when they see a clean case. They opened settlement discussions. Quiet. Controlled. No dramatic press conference. No public apology on day one. Just lawyers talking about risk, cost, and what happens if this video gets shown in open court. Long-term consequences were the kind that don't make movies, but they change real life. Officer Harlan received serious discipline. In a realistic department, that meant a sustained finding on biased policing and conduct during a stop, plus potential suspension without pay. Depending on the state and prior record, decertification became a real threat. The department updated supervision rules for extended stops. If a stop goes beyond the original traffic basis without a citation being written or a clear articulable reason, a supervisor must be notified. They revised documentation requirements. Officers had to articulate specific facts for detentions and searches, not vibes. They increased auditing of stop data by race, including where stops occurred and how often consent searches were requested. And Jamal? He didn't win by humiliating a cop. He won by refusing to be bullied into giving up his rights and by making sure the record existed. He kept prosecuting cases. He didn't become a full-time activist, but he did something practical. He spoke at a local community legal clinic, quietly, not for clout, about what to do during a stop, how to keep your hands visible, how to refuse consent without getting loud, how to ask if you're detained, how to request a supervisor, how to document names and badge numbers, how to preserve evidence. Because the lesson wasn't be a federal prosecutor. The lesson was act like the camera is the courtroom, even if you're the only one staying calm. And that's the part people need to hear. If an officer's fishing, your job isn't to talk your way out of it. Your job is to keep yourself safe, keep your words clean, and not hand over rights you don't have to surrender. So let me ask you, if you were Jamal, would you have stayed that calm? Would you have known what to say? And if you've ever been in a stop that felt like it wasn't really about traffic, what happened? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share this with someone who needs it, and don't forget to subscribe for more story times where accountability actually lands.
Man, where you coming from? Where you headed?
I'll address travel questions after we handle the stop. What's the
Okay.
traffic reason you pulled me over?
All right, man, I need your license and registration.
I'm happy to handle the traffic stop. They're inside my car. I'll show you.
Go ahead, get the documents.
What happens if you do everything right in a traffic stop? Signal, pull over, hands visible, license ready, and the officer still decides your compliance isn't enough? And what if the next thing he demands isn't about the stop at all? That exact question got answered the night a black civil rights lawyer got pulled over for a minor issue, then watched an officer turn a routine interaction into an unlawful detention on camera. Where are you watching from right now, city or state? Drop it in the comments. And if you like stories where calm wins, receipts matter, and authority gets checked the right way, hit like and subscribe. Now rewind. Malik Grant wasn't reckless. He wasn't speeding through neighborhoods. He wasn't weaving. He was heading home after a long day, suit jacket tossed on the passenger seat, phone on the dash mount like always. A patrol car lit him up near a gas station in a strip mall, bright area, cameras everywhere. Malik noticed that immediately. He pulled over clean, turned the engine off, rolled the window halfway down, hands on the wheel. Officer Tyler Briggs approached like he'd already decided what kind of person Malik was. Briggs asked for license and registration. Malik handed them over. Normal. Then the stop started drifting. Briggs didn't stick to the supposed reason. He began asking questions that weren't about a traffic issue. Where Malik was coming from. Where he was going. Who the car belonged to. Little probes, not illegal by themselves, just a setup. Malik answered the minimum and then got quiet, not rude, controlled. That's when Briggs pushed for more. He demanded Malik provide additional identification, not his driver's license. Something else. Extra proof. Malik didn't flinch. He didn't puff his chest out either. He spoke like a man who knew the exact line between cooperation and surrender. He told Briggs he'd already provided what the law required for a traffic stop. He said he wasn't obligated to produce a second form of ID without a legal basis. He asked if he was suspected of a crime beyond the traffic infraction. He asked if he was being detained for something specific. Briggs didn't answer those questions cleanly. He didn't clarify. He didn't wrap the stop up. He treated Malik's legal clarity as a challenge. Briggs repeated the demand, louder, sharper. He implied Malik was refusing. He implied consequences. Malik stayed steady and did the one thing that changes the whole power dynamic. He made a record. He stated that he was recording. He stated he would comply with lawful orders. He stated he did not consent to any search. He asked for a supervisor. He asked, again, whether he was free to go. Briggs didn't like the recording part. You could tell by how quickly the tone changed. Briggs ordered Malik out of the car. Here's what matters. Officers can order a driver out during a stop in many situations. That's real. The trick is how it gets used. Safety tool or punishment tool. This felt like punishment. Malik didn't argue on the roadside. He moved slowly, hands visible. He narrated his actions as he stepped out. He said he was doing it under protest, not consent. He said he wanted a supervisor present. Briggs directed Malik to the back of the car. Tight posture, close distance, commands stacked on commands. Then Briggs went right back to the demand. Extra ID, extra compliance, extra submission. Malik asked the question that kills games like this later. What legal basis existed to extend the stop beyond the traffic issue? Briggs didn't give one. He pivoted to attitude, respect, cooperation, that old script. And then Briggs slipped. Not with a slur, not with something that would make the department panic instantly. He made it personal. He focused on Malik's tone and confidence, like that was the threat. Like a calm black man who knows the rules is automatically suspicious. That's when Malik revealed he was an attorney. Not to flex, to put the officer on notice that the words being said right now were going to matter later. Briggs didn't back off. He backed into a new plan. He walked to his cruiser not to finish the citation, but to buy time and search for justification after the fact. Malik stayed where he was told, recording, speaking clearly. He noted the time, the location, badge number. He pointed out the businesses nearby with cameras. He sent a quick message to his sister with his location and what was happening. Not drama, documentation. Cars passed. A couple slowed. People stared and kept moving. Nobody wanted to get involved. Also normal. Then Briggs came back from the cruiser with a different energy. Like he'd decided the stop couldn't end until Malik learned something. Briggs came back from his cruiser holding Malik's driver's license and didn't hand it back. That move changed the whole stop. A normal traffic stop ends when the license is checked, a citation is issued or a warning is given, and the driver leaves. Briggs didn't do that. He used the license like a handle to keep Malik in place. He told Malik he needed additional verification and demanded a second form of ID. Not because Malik refused to identify himself. Malik already did. Not because the license looked fake. Briggs never said that. Briggs just wanted more. Malik didn't raise his voice. He didn't try to embarrass the officer. He asked the only questions that matter when a stop drifts. What crime was being investigated beyond the traffic issue? And what legal basis existed to demand extra identification after the driver's license had been provided? Briggs didn't answer cleanly. He moved to attitude. He framed Malik's questions as disrespect. He treated basic boundaries like defiance. Then Briggs escalated the pressure the way officers do when they don't have a real reason but still want control. He repeated the demand for another ID. He warned Malik the stop would get worse if he kept making it hard. He implied Malik could be detained longer. He floated obstruction like it was a button he could press any time. Malik didn't debate the definition of obstruction on the roadside. He just pinned Briggs to the record. He asked Briggs to state what law Malik was violating by refusing a second ID when he'd already provided his driver's license. Briggs couldn't do it. He didn't cite anything specific. He went back to suspicious behavior in officer safety, broad words, convenient words, the kind you can't easily disprove in the moment, but also the kind that collapse when there's video and timestamps. Malik kept building the timeline out loud for his recording. He stated he had already produced license, registration, and insurance. He stated he would accept a citation or warning for the traffic issue. He stated he did not consent to searches. He stated he was requesting a supervisor because Briggs was extending the stop without stating a lawful reason. Briggs tried to change the geometry. He directed Malik to stand farther away, closer to a spot where the phone would capture less. He attempted to control the angle by controlling Malik's position. Malik didn't argue about it. He made a practical adjustment to keep his phone pointed where it needed to be. Subtle, not dramatic, still effective. That's when Briggs went after the recording. He told Malik to stop recording and implied it wasn't allowed. He implied it could be taken as interference. Malik didn't touch the phone. He kept his hands visible. He stated that the phone was mounted, he wasn't holding it, and he wasn't interfering with the officer's movement. Then he asked Briggs to confirm whether he was issuing a lawful order to stop recording. Briggs didn't confirm it because he couldn't. He just repeated himself. You could see the problem forming in real time. Briggs wanted Malik to either comply and surrender the record or refuse in a way Briggs could label as non-compliance. Malik wasn't giving him either. Then Malik did something that shifted Briggs's mindset. He identified himself as a civil rights attorney. Not a speech, not a threat, just a fact stated plainly, like it belonged in the timeline. Briggs paused for a second. Not long, just long enough to show he understood what that meant. This wasn't a random driver who'd forget the details tomorrow. This was someone trained to preserve details and force them into documents. Briggs could have ended the stop right there. Hand back the license, issue the warning, walk away, clean exit. He didn't. He doubled down, demanded the extra ID again, and reintroduced obstruction, like saying the word might make it true. Malik stayed in the same lane. He repeated that he'd comply with lawful orders tied to the traffic stop. He repeated that he would not provide additional identification without reasonable suspicion of another crime. He requested a supervisor again. Briggs finally called for one. While they waited, Briggs kept the stop suspended in that uncomfortable middle state, not arresting Malik, not releasing him, keeping him standing, keeping his license, letting time do the work. That's a tactic too. Malik didn't fill the silence with nervous explanations. He didn't try to convince Briggs he was a good person. He stayed focused on the legal structure of the stop. He continued recording. He spoke in short, factual statements for the timeline, location, time, and what was being demanded. Then Sergeant Elena Park arrived. Park stepped out and read the scene fast. Malik standing near the rear of his car, phone recording, hands visible. Briggs in control of Malik's documents. No visible danger, no frantic movement, no obvious reason for the stop to still be going. Park asked Briggs what the stop was for. Briggs named a minor infraction, something that usually leads to a quick warning. Park asked whether Malik had provided his driver's license. Briggs admitted he had. Park asked what new crime justified demanding a second form of ID and holding Malik longer. Briggs tried to fill the gap with vague claims. He described Malik as uncooperative. He implied Malik's answers didn't satisfy him. He suggested Malik's demeanor raised suspicion. Park didn't accept demeanor as a crime. You could tell by how she narrowed it down. She asked if the license was valid. Briggs said it came back valid. That should have ended it. Park told Briggs to return Malik's documents. Briggs hesitated. Park repeated it, firmer. That wasn't negotiation. That was oversight. Briggs handed the documents back. Park told Malik he was free to leave. Malik didn't ask for an apology. He didn't argue about what just happened. He asked for the incident number and how to request body camera footage. He confirmed Park's name and role on scene, so it couldn't get fuzzy later. He repeated Briggs's badge number out loud for the recording, then got into his car and drove off. Briggs stayed behind, watching Malik leave, the way someone watches a situation they thought they controlled slip out of their hands. And Malik already knew what came next. Not a debate, not a viral clip first, a complaint, evidence requests, internal review, then the part departments hate most, a lawsuit built on their own video. Malik got home and didn't sleep it off. He locked the evidence down. He saved the recording to cloud storage and to a second device. Then he wrote a timeline while every detail was still fresh. Exact location, approximate minute marks, the order of demands, the moment Briggs threatened obstruction, the moment Briggs tried to shut down the recording, the moment Sergeant Park arrived and ended it. By morning, Malik filed a formal complaint. He didn't write it like an emotional story. He wrote it like something that could survive a review board. He described what happened in plain language. Briggs demanded additional ID after Malik already provided a driver's license. Briggs couldn't state reasonable suspicion for another crime. Briggs kept Malik detained anyway. Briggs threatened arrest for obstruction when Malik asked for the legal basis. Briggs tried to order Malik to stop recording. The stop ended only after a supervisor arrived. Then Malik made sure the department couldn't pretend there was no evidence. He requested body camera footage for Briggs and Park. He requested dash camera footage. He requested the CAD logs and radio traffic. He requested the dispatch notes and any database check timestamps tied to his license and plate. He also sent a preservation letter. That letter matters because once it's on record, missing footage becomes a bigger problem. Internal Affairs opened a case within a few days. Lieutenant Harris handled it. Straight policy mindset. No speeches, just facts. First thing Harris did was pull Briggs' written narrative. Briggs described Malik as uncooperative and suggested Malik refuse to identify. That phrasing shows up a lot because it makes the officer sound justified without explaining what actually happened. Harris compared that narrative to the records. The CAD log showed when the stop started and when the license check happened. It showed the stop stayed active long after the traffic purpose should have been finished. That gap needed an explanation. Then, the footage came in. The video showed Malik handing over his license early and staying controlled. It showed Briggs demanding a second ID without naming a crime. It showed the obstruction threat. It showed Briggs pushing to end the recording. It showed Park arriving and immediately asking basic questions that Briggs couldn't answer. It showed Park ordering the documents returned and releasing Malik. That's when Briggs' story started falling apart. Harris interviewed Briggs and didn't let him hide behind buzzwords. Briggs tried officer safety and suspicious demeanor. Harris asked for the specific facts that created reasonable suspicion. Harris asked why extra ID was required if the license was valid. Harris asked why obstruction was mentioned when Malik wasn't physically interfering or refusing lawful traffic stop requirements. Briggs couldn't point to a real trigger. He kept circling back to Malik's tone and attitude. That's not a legal basis, that's ego. Harris also interviewed Park. Park didn't defend Briggs. She confirmed what mattered. Malik had provided his license, Briggs didn't articulate a separate crime on scene, and Park ended the detention immediately. Park's statement didn't need to call Briggs biased. It just needed to show he had no lawful reason to keep pushing. After that, the department did what it always claims it does. They checked pattern. They pulled other stops from Briggs's recent months. Not because Malik demanded it, because once there's a documented complaint with video and a supervisor intervention, command staff starts thinking about liability. If this wasn't the first time Briggs stretched stops and leaned on intimidation, the department needed to know before it showed up in court. Briggs got moved off solo patrol during the review. That's not a public punishment, but inside the station, it's loud. It changes your assignments. It changes your reputation. It tells everyone the brass is watching your work. A few weeks later, the discipline decision hit. Briggs received a suspension and mandatory retraining focused on detention limits and constitutional policing during traffic stops. He also lost certain privileges tied to independent patrol work for a period. That's how departments try to contain a problem without admitting the bigger one. He shouldn't have done it in the first place. Malik read the finding and didn't treat it like the finish line. Internal discipline happens quietly. It doesn't repair the harm. It doesn't deter the next officer who thinks intimidation is policing. Malik wanted accountability that had teeth. So he moved to the next step. Malik filed the lawsuit 2 weeks after the discipline letter landed. He didn't file it to get back at Briggs. He filed it because internal punishment doesn't protect the next person. A civil rights case forces facts into the open. depositions, policies, training records, stop data. That's where departments start taking it seriously. The complaint named 2 defendants, Officer Tyler Briggs and the city police department. The claims were straightforward and dangerous for the city. Briggs unlawfully extended a traffic stop after the traffic purpose was complete. Briggs demanded additional identification without reasonable suspicion of a separate crime. Briggs threatened obstruction as a pressure tool, not as a lawful charge. Briggs attempted to stop Malik from recording, which looked like an effort to control evidence. Malik's legal theory wasn't fancy. It was clean. The Constitution doesn't allow an officer to keep someone detained just because the person doesn't sound cooperative. The stop has a purpose. Once that purpose is done, the officer needs a real, articulable reason to keep going. The city's first response was predictable. They tried to downgrade it. They argued Malik wasn't really harmed because he wasn't arrested. They claimed Briggs acted in good faith. They said it was a miscommunication during a lawful stop. That argument didn't survive the evidence. Malik's team attached the timeline, the supervisor's involvement, and the internal findings. They leaned hard on the part that kills the city's defense. Park arrived, asked what new crime existed, got no clear answer, and ended the detention immediately. Then discovery started. This is where the department stopped treating it like one officer's mistake and started treating it like a risk. Malik requested Briggs's body cam and dash cam in full, not clipped. Park's body cam in full. CAD logs, radio audio, dispatch notes. Training records for Briggs, including constitutional policing and traffic stop procedures. Briggs's prior complaints and discipline history to the extent allowed. Stop data to see whether Briggs disproportionately extended stops or demanded extra ID from certain drivers. Department policies on identification demands, stop duration, and recording by civilians. The city fought some of it. Of course they did. They tried to limit the scope. They argued privacy. They argued relevance. They tried to keep it narrow enough that it stayed just this one night. Malik pushed back with something cities hate: pattern evidence. Because once you show this wasn't random, the settlement number changes. And the political heat changes too. Depositions were the turning point. Briggs got questioned under oath. The questions were basic, but every answer mattered. Why did he demand a second ID after the driver's license was provided? What crime did he suspect? When did he develop that suspicion? Why did he threaten obstruction? Briggs tried to wrap everything in safety. Malik's side pulled him back to specifics. Safety from what? What threat, what behavior, what facts? Briggs couldn't point to anything concrete that justified extending the stop. He kept circling back to refusal and uncooperative attitude. That's how you lose a civil rights case. You admit the detention was driven by emotion, not law. Then Park testified. Park didn't attack Briggs. She didn't need to. She confirmed she asked for the basis of continued detention and didn't get one. She confirmed she ordered the documents returned and released Malik. Now the city had a problem. Not a PR problem. A courtroom problem. Because a jury doesn't need to love Malik to understand this. You don't get to detain someone longer because you didn't like how they spoke. The city moved towards settlement. They didn't call it an admission. They never do. They framed it as resolving the matter. But the terms told the truth. Malik received a significant financial settlement. Part of it covered legal fees. Part of it compensated him for the unlawful detention and the rights violation. The amount wasn't a lottery number, but it wasn't a nuisance check either. It was enough that the city council asked questions. The city also agreed to non-monetary terms, updated training focused on stop duration limits and ID demands, a policy reminder about civilians recording police in public spaces, supervisor review triggers for extended stops without clear reasonable suspicion. Those changes weren't perfect, but they were real. They created friction against the exact behavior Briggs used that night. Briggs faced consequences beyond the earlier suspension. His discipline stayed in his file. His deposition testimony followed him. Promotions became harder. Specialty assignments got out of reach. Supervisors watched his stops. And inside policing culture, being the officer tied to a settlement and policy change isn't a quiet thing. It sticks. Malik didn't turn into a superhero after this. He stayed the same person. He just became even more methodical about teaching people what actually works in moments like this. Not yelling, not trying to win the roadside argument, staying calm, saying as little as possible, asking the right questions, recording, getting the supervisor, then using the system after the fact. When you can do it safely, that's the lesson. A lot of people think accountability only happens if you get lucky. Malik showed something else. Accountability happens when you keep your head, preserve evidence, and force the story into places where it can't be edited. So let me ask you, if you were Malik, would you have stayed that calm? Or would the pressure have pulled you into the argument Briggs wanted? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you've ever had a stop that felt like it turned into a power game, share what happened. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and stick around for more real stories where people stand their ground and the receipts do the talking.
Stop a second. Let me see your documents that prove you are a U.S. citizen.
Why I should do this? Is there a clear reason?
I don't need a reason. Just show me the documents.
What's the legal reason for the stop?
I need proof of citizenship or lawful status. Show me and we're done.
I'm willing to cooperate. Identify yourself clearly and tell me the basis.
What happens when a plainclothes immigration agent blocks a black doctor outside a hospital before sunrise, demands proof he belongs there, and won't even say whether it's a detention? It doesn't stay a rude stop for long. Because the cameras don't just catch the attitude, they catch the tactics. And once witnesses step in, the whole thing turns into a documented mess the agent can't talk his way out of. Quick question before we rewind. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or state in the comments. And if you like stories where people don't win by yelling, but by staying sharp and forcing accountability, hit like and subscribe. You'll want more of these. Now, here's what everyone nearby saw. Dr. Malcolm Evans walked from the employee lot toward the main entrance. Badge visible, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. He looked like every early shift doctor who didn't sleep enough and had too much to do. An unknown man stepped into his path like he owned the sidewalk. Not in a friendly way, not with a question. With that clipped tone people use when they're trying to turn a public space into a private interrogation. The man demanded identification and leaned on federal authority without explaining anything. Evans didn't flinch. He didn't puff his chest. He didn't try to prove he was important. He kept it procedural. He asked if he was being detained or if he was free to go. He asked for the legal reason. He asked the man to identify himself clearly. The man didn't answer those questions. He just repeated the demand for ID and moved closer. That was the whole play. Crowd the space, control the pace, make compliance feel like the only safe option. Evans didn't give him the reaction he wanted. No anger, no panic, no fast movements. He stayed in place and repeated the same boundaries. Identify yourself. State the reason. Clarify detention status. The man switched tactics. He implied that refusing meant guilt. He hinted at searching Evans. He raised his voice just enough to pull attention from the entrance doors. A couple staff members looked over, then slowed down. That's what the agent wanted. Public pressure. Embarrassment as a weapon. Evans didn't bite. He repositioned slightly, not dramatically, just enough that he wasn't boxed in. He didn't sprint. He didn't back up like he was scared either. He scanned the area like someone who understood environments. Exterior cameras, a security patrol route, staff traffic. A lit entrance with people going in and out. He used what was there. Evans told the man to call his supervisor if this was legitimate. Then he asked for hospital security to come out, not as a threat, as a normal step in a workplace with policies. That request changed the temperature. You could see it in the man's posture. Because one-on-one intimidation works best when nobody else is watching and nobody else is writing anything down. Now there were witnesses. Now there would be names, times, footage. Now it wasn't just Evans versus a guy with a badge and an attitude. A nurse coming in for shift slowed near the doors. A resident stood half-turned like he wasn't trying to stare, but couldn't ignore it. A custodian paused by the sidewalk edge, watching the space the way people do when they're ready to step in if it goes sideways. The man tried to keep it vague. He kept repeating that he was federal and that Evans needed to comply. Still no clear reason. Still no direct answer on detention. Evans stayed steady and kept making the man choose. Either this was a detention with a reason, or it was not. Either the man could identify himself properly, or he couldn't. Either there was lawful cause, or this was harassment dressed up as authority. Security arrived within minutes. And that was the point where the agent stopped acting like the scene belonged to him. Because security didn't care about swagger, they cared about procedure. Who are you? What agency? Why are you stopping an employee on hospital property? Are you detaining him, yes or no? The agent tried to talk around it. Security didn't let him, and right there, on camera in front of staff, the agent's story started to wobble. Security showed up with that work mode calm. No drama, just questions. The kind that force people to either explain themselves or expose themselves. They asked the agent who he was, what agency, and why he was stopping an employee on hospital property. They asked if Dr. Evans was being detained. The agent tried to keep control by staying vague. He leaned hard on federal authority and investigation language. He didn't want to say the words that create liability, detention, reasonable suspicion, probable cause. Anything specific. Security didn't let him float. They asked for credentials. They asked for a name. They asked for a badge number. They asked if he'd checked in with administration like any outside enforcement is supposed to do. That's when the agent tried a different move. He attempted to make Evans the problem. He suggested Evans was being uncooperative. He implied that refusal alone made him suspicious. Evans stayed locked in. He didn't argue character. He didn't argue status. He kept the same line. He'd cooperate once the agent identified himself clearly and stated the legal basis for the stop. He repeated that he didn't consent to any search. He repeated the question about detention. Security started treating it like what it was. An unknown plainclothes man trying to hold a staff doctor in place without a clear reason. They positioned themselves so Evans wasn't boxed in. Subtle, but deliberate. They also made sure they were between the agent and the entrance traffic. Now the agent had a new problem. He couldn't intimidate Evans, and he couldn't intimidate security either. So he reached for the oldest tool in the kit. Volume. He spoke louder so staff would hear. He threw out phrases that sound official but don't mean much. He tried to create the impression that Evans was doing something wrong by not instantly complying. It didn't land. Not the way he wanted. Because the staff watching weren't confused about what they were seeing. They saw a doctor trying to go to work. They saw a man trying to stop him without explaining why. They saw security asking normal questions and getting dodges in return. Security asked if the agent had an active case tied to the hospital. They asked if he had a description and why Evans matched it. They asked if there was a warrant. They asked if there was a bolo with a specific person in it. The agent gave the kind of answer that sounds confident until someone repeats it back slowly. Something about a possible match. Something about a lookout. Something about needing to verify. Security pressed for details. Height, clothing, name, photo, anything. That's where the story started shifting. First it was a match, then it became similar, Then it turned into routine verification. Then it slid into just doing my job. You could see the scramble. He didn't want to admit he had nothing. He also didn't want to leave, because leaving looks like he was wrong. Evans didn't help him save face. He didn't attack him either. He just let the questions do the work. Security asked for the agent's supervisor. Evans asked again too. Not emotional, just persistent. And security backed it. They told the agent to call his supervisor or they would. The agent finally made the call. While they waited, security documented time, location, description, names of witnesses who were willing to give them. They noted the badge and credentials once the agent reluctantly showed them. They also made it clear the hospital had exterior cameras covering the walkway. That camera mention hit different, because now it wasn't a he said, it was footage. Audio from multiple angles, timestamp. The agent tried one last pressure move. He told Evans that if he walked away, it would look bad. He hinted there could be consequences. Evans didn't respond with fear. He responded like a professional who understands leverage. He told security he had rounds. He stated he was willing to wait for the supervisor's arrival, but he wasn't going to be held without a lawful reason. That's the moment security got sharper. They told the agent, plainly, that he needed to clarify whether Evans was being detained. Because if he wasn't, Evans was going to work. The agent hesitated. And hesitation told everyone what the agent wouldn't say out loud. Because if he said yes, he'd need justification. If he said no, he'd lose control. That's when the supervisor arrived. And the second that supervisor stepped into the scene, the whole vibe changed again. The supervisor didn't posture. He went straight to verification. Quick questions, quick checks, the stuff that takes 1 minute when it's actually legitimate. And the truth started to surface fast. Evans wasn't the person the agent claimed to be looking for. Not even close. The supervisor walked in and didn't waste time trying to win the moment. He went straight for the basics. Who the employee was, what the agent thought he had, what the actual target description was supposed to be, what the legal basis was for a stop on hospital property. And you could almost feel the agent's story shrinking as the questions got simpler. The supervisor asked Evans for his hospital ID. Evans showed it. Security watched the exchange closely, making sure nobody turned it into a grab or a snatch and search moment. The supervisor checked the badge, looked at the name, looked at the photo, then looked back at his own agent, like he already knew what this was, because the mismatch was obvious. The agent tried to patch it anyway. He mentioned a similar description and acted like it was normal to stop someone based on a vague idea of who they might be. He tried to slide the narrative into no harm done, routine check, everyone move on. Security didn't let that rewrite happen. They asked what the original description actually was. They asked whether the agent had a photo. They asked whether he had a case number. They asked whether he had a requested hospital cooperation through the proper channels. The supervisor didn't answer with a story. He answered with damage control. He told the agent to disengage. He told him Evans wasn't the person. He told him to clear out. The agent didn't apologize. He didn't admit anything. He tried to leave like it was a normal stop that reached a normal conclusion. But the scene was already locked into record. Security had the time log. They had the agent's identity. They had his supervisor's name. They had witnesses who watched the whole interaction start to finish. They also had exterior cameras that covered the walkway and the entrance. And now, because the supervisor had stepped in and confirmed Evans wasn't the target, the agent had no room left to claim ongoing suspicion. The reason for holding Evans in place was gone. Evans kept it calm to the end. He didn't take a victory lap. He didn't lecture the agent. He said one thing that landed because it was clean and factual. He wasn't going to be treated like a suspect without a reason, and he wasn't going to consent his way into someone else's mistake. Then he went to work. That's the part people always miss when they watch these situations from the outside. The moment ends, but your body doesn't. Evans walked into the hospital with his coffee and his phone like he'd planned. But he wasn't fine. He was controlled. There's a difference. He still had patients, he still had rounds, he still had to lead a team and make decisions like nothing happened. That takes effort. Later that day, security pulled the incident report together. They preserved camera footage. They wrote down witness names. They flagged that a federal agent had approached and attempted to stop an employee without checking in, without a stated lawful basis, and without clear detention language. The next layer hit fast. Hospital administration got notified. Risk management got looped in. HR got looped in. Not because Evans was special, because it happened on their property, involved their employee, and created liability. And now the agency couldn't pretend it never happened. Because when you have a time-stamped security log, camera footage, nurse witness statements, and a supervisor who verified the mistake on scene, that's not rumor. That's evidence. The agent tried to escape the situation with one last move as he left. He spoke like he expected everyone to drop it, like the badge itself was supposed to end the conversation. Security didn't argue with him. They didn't need to. They just told him the hospital would be following up through official channels. By the next morning, the story had already moved through the hospital in the way these things always do, not as gossip, as a warning. People didn't talk about it like some weird thing. They talked about it like a line got crossed and everyone saw it. Nurses, residents, security, even staff who weren't there. Because somebody always knows somebody who was standing 10 feet away. Evans showed up for his shift again. Same routine, same badge, same parking lot. Different feeling. He kept doing his job, but he didn't let it slide. Not privately, not quietly. Not with a, whatever, it's over. That day, he met with hospital security and asked for the incident report number. He asked who had access to the camera footage. He asked for the names of the supervisor and agent as recorded. He asked what the hospital's official process was when an outside enforcement officer approached staff on campus. He treated it like a patient case. Document, confirm, escalate properly. Security already had the key pieces. Time-stamped logs of when the agent approached, names and descriptions. Witnesses who agreed to be listed. Confirmation that the supervisor arrived and ended it. Camera angles covering the walkway and entrance. Then hospital administration stepped in. Risk management got involved first because this wasn't just someone felt uncomfortable. This was an outside agent interfering with a staff member in the course of reporting for duty, on hospital property, in front of witnesses, with cameras. That's liability, safety, and operations all at once. HR got involved too, not to handle feelings, but to support the employee and document what happened as a workplace incident. They asked Evans for a written statement. He gave them one. Tight, factual, chronological, no extra, no rant. He also filed an external complaint, not a social media blast, not a viral post, the formal kind. He submitted the incident details, names, time, location, and the fact that the agent refused to state whether it was a detention while trying to restrict movement. He emphasized that the entire encounter existed on camera and involved multiple employees as witnesses. That detail mattered. Because he said, she said is easy to bury. Video and logs aren't. The hospital did its own follow-up. They contacted the agency through official channels and made something clear. Any future presence on campus required check-in through hospital administration and security. No more free roaming, no more lone plainclothes stops of staff walking in from the employee lot. If there was a legitimate need, it went through the proper route. And here's what changed fast, because hospitals don't like chaos. Security updated protocol. Staff got a short guidance memo. It didn't turn into a political speech. It was practical. If someone claims federal authority on campus, employees were told to direct them to security and keep moving if they weren't detained. If an employee felt blocked or pressured, call security immediately. No one was expected to handle it alone. Security also shifted patrol presence during early hours for a while. Not because the hospital feared immigration agents, because they wanted staff to feel protected walking in at 5 a.m. As for the agent, this is where reality comes in. You don't always see instant public punishment. You usually see quiet consequences. The agent's name was now attached to a recorded incident. His supervisor's presence on the footage mattered too. The hospital's complaint created a paper trail outside the building. That changes how people act in the future. It forces oversight. It forces internal review. It also makes it harder for that same agent to pull the same move on the same property again without someone recognizing him. Evans didn't get a parade. He didn't need one. He got something better. A documented record that protected him and everyone who came after him. A protocol. A line in the sand that said, you don't get to treat staff like suspects just because you feel like it. And that's the part people should take from this. Evans didn't win because he was a doctor. He won because he didn't play the agent's game. He didn't argue emotions. He didn't try to impress anyone. He forced procedure. He asked the questions that matter. Am I being detained or free to go? What's the legal reason? Who are you exactly? Call a supervisor. Bring security. Put it on record. That's how you survive an overreach moment without turning it into a bigger problem for yourself. So here's the question for you. If you were Evans, would you have stayed calm and gone procedural? Or would the pressure have pulled you into a reaction the other guy could use? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you've ever had someone use authority like a weapon, share this with somebody who needs a smarter playbook. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Real situations, real accountability, and people who refuse to get bullied out of their dignity.